Welcome back to another episode of the Brawn Performance and Rehab Podcast, powered by ISOFIT and Firefly Recovery. ISOFIT is my go-to for all things isometric strength training. For more on ISOFIT, be sure to check out isofit.com. Episodes like this are made possible by Firefly, the official recovery provider of the Brawn Performance and Rehab Podcast. For more on Firefly, be sure to check out recoveryfirefly.com. This episode is powered by Dr. Ray Gorman, founder of Engage Movement. Learn how to boost your income without relying on sessions. Get a free training on the blended practice model by following at Ray Gorman DPT on Instagram. Joining me today on the podcast is Tex McQuilkin. Tex and I are going to dive into what we're calling Ballin on a budget. How to make it work as a strength and conditioning professional when you might have limited access or no access to equipment. Maybe your time with your team is very, very limited. And how are you going to make that work when you have a very short amount of time? Maybe even just 15 minutes to work with your athletes that way. This was an incredible episode, and I really appreciated Tex's insights in this episode. Be sure to catch both of us at the NSCA conference in Kansas City later this week. We're both going to be there. We're both recording podcasts for our shows as well. Be sure to stop by and say hello to both of us that way. Enjoy. Tex, welcome to the podcast. I'm super excited to work with you today. Big fan of the work you're doing on your own podcast and within the strength and conditioning space that way, man. For people who aren't familiar with you, or maybe they haven't listened to the Captains and Coaches podcast yet, would you mind filling them in a little bit about who you are and all the great stuff you're doing?
It's been a long road. Coaching for 16 years, over 6 continents. So very, very fortunate. Had a lot of great mentors along the way that really poured into me and put me in a position to not only understand movement and then this scope of programming and long-term athletic development, but also standing and presenting. So I'm an introvert by nature, but a learned extrovert. Public speaking is the number one fear in the world, more than dying, which is wild. So they threw me out to the wolves early, and I was not good for a long time until I was. And I remember the moment it clicked for me to really just feel the energy in the room and own a full seminar and clinic. And that was a big moment for me. So very fortunate to travel the world, teaching people how to teach people to lift weights and run fast. And then I stay connected to the sport. So I grew up playing football, but then was high school lacrosse player into college, Division III, All-Star, and that opened up my first coaching opportunity as a graduate assistant coach for the team that I played for. And then I was team captain for 3 years and stepped into a coaching role. And these were my friends, they were my teammates, but now they were my athletes. And battling that dichotomy of, hey, how do I walk the line between being a good friend and then being a coach and a leader? Because I know what they did on weekends. So there a lot of self-discovery in that first couple of years as that grad assistant coach. And a lot of the lessons that I teach now to captains and coaches is that entry-level leadership. That first time that I'm handed responsibility, whether it's as a team captain or my first time coaching, and that's going to be your greatest growth year. You're going to make every mistake that's going to be a future lesson. So the bottom of the barrel of that conference, we had even less. So now I took over the strength and conditioning responsibilities of my team. That first training session, we needed upper body strength. I asked the dudes to kick up into a handstand against this giant wall that we have for wall ball lacrosse practice. And our number one dude, he like kicks down, he falls down from the wall, and I run up and I try to MF him, right? Texas football coach style. And his arm is just dangling there. He couldn't move it. And I tore his rotator cuff because I didn't know what the hell I was doing. So I had to just take responsibility for that. And then I found mentors. I found people to dive into to learn how to be a coach. And there's a lot of lessons with that. There's the IQ of, okay, here's the program, here's what we do, here's the long-term development. Now, how do I change paths and trajectories because of missteps, because of stress from the relationships, etc. So I have to understand what to do. But then there's this EQ side, this emotional quotient of how to do it, right? I have this perfect theory of what to do, but then I got to remember these are people. So a lot of lessons within that first few years. And from Marymount University, my alma mater, to coaching, I realized I was a hell of a better strength coach than I was a sport coach. So I jumped over to across the river to Georgetown University, still working with lacrosse men's and women's at this stage. And then it was an even bigger jump because I had imposter syndrome. I was a D3 guy stepping into a D1, now working with scholarship athletes. And I assumed that they wanted to work hard, like, oh, they're so happy to be there. No, they are really talented and they don't want to work. They don't want to lift weights. Why should they lift that? It's heavy. They can shoot the ball faster than F, right? So it's now finding ways to buy in. I had buy-in from my D3 teammates because they saw the sacrifice and everything I did. But now I really had to lean in and understand the EQ side of things, and I picked up a whole bunch of sports, right? Crew, anyone that's been at the Olympic side of strength and conditioning at the college level, there's a sport you want to work with, and then all the other sports you work with. So I had to take this idea of, okay, training for lacrosse, don't scratch that. We're now training for athleticism and developing all this different stuff. And I had a great relationship with the crew coach, the women's crew coach, and she let me do whatever I wanted. So it was interesting to truly learn how to coach. I had those D3 guys who were not athletic, and I could learn how to communicate because everything I threw at them, they weren't strong enough to get hurt. Now I had my scholarship athletes, and I was responsible for their performance, and I needed to protect them from themselves often, right? The amount of volume of sport practice and running and grinding and lack of sleep from extracurricular activities at that level, you got to take all these things into consideration, and you're not going to be appreciated. So you got to find appreciation where it counts. During that time at Georgetown, I was very fortunate. At the time, this is 2010, this is 2012, but the 2010s fitness space was wild. CrossFit had taken over like wildfire, and they had a particular seminar for sports specific application, aka CrossFit football. So I was fortunate on weekends to travel the world and teach this sports performance seminar to new coaches, right? They're getting into the fitness space and they're learning how to lift for something versus the sport of fitness, which is the sport. Now I have to learn how to lift weights for a sport, for football, for lacrosse, for basketball, whatever it may be, right? It was all over the world. For Korea, it was baseball themed. For Australia and South Africa, it was rugby themed. So now I'm learning as a presenter to take this base level of athletic development knowledge and tailor it to their specific goals as coaches to help them tailor it to their specific athletes' goals. So, dude, super fun in that first phase, and so many lessons that I'm aiming to highlight here. And as mentioned with the captains and coaches, like leaning heavy into EQ, and I'm calling it social emotional leadership. And there's a ton of lessons, and every coach that I interview within the podcast is highlighting that first year, that entry level leadership where you made every mistake you're going to make, and it's now these future lessons that you hand off as a mentor.
Tex, you have such a wealth of knowledge and experience in the space that way. And as you mentioned, we all have a tendency to make mistakes. And I certainly feel like my own philosophies and frameworks about the work that I do changed a lot compared from year one to where I'm at today that way. And one of the things that I think I made the mistake of thinking year one out from school that way was I thought it was more about the equipment that you had access to. As I was in a PT clinic space, it didn't have a whole lot. It was one of those very stereotypical ones that I probably make memes about now that had nothing heavier than the 10-pound med ball. I was like, well, what can I do in here? I don't have a power rack. I don't have a barbell. I don't have heavy dumbbells or kettlebells. I just don't have any of the equipment that I wanted. And I felt like I was set up for failure because I didn't have access to the things that I wanted. However, I ended up kind of reframing my approach and my mindset and making the most out of nothing, or what I felt like was nothing. A 10-pound medicine ball, table, some of those typical TheraBand type things, nothing crazy, but we got creative and crafty and we were able to make it work. I find talking with coaches a lot of times they feel like they're in similar situations where unfortunately they're not able to get access to all of the equipment they want to have from a budgetary standpoint, or maybe it's a space standpoint, or whatever it is. They don't have access to everything that they want. However, they still need to get it done. And I know
Hmm.
in particular around your recent work on the strength and conditioning side, you've been able to get really crafty and creative. I love the way you've implemented things like manual resisted exercises, for example, that way. So I'd love to hear your thoughts and framework around how you go about programming for the athletes that you work with when maybe equipment access isn't necessarily in the picture.
Yeah, this is where I take a lot of pride and have a lot of fun with it because it's so much fun for me to lead the teams and teach, right? I'm not sitting on my high horse and saying there's in a perfect world, here's how it should be. I'm with dudes, I'm aiming to build buy-in every single day and applying these different tools and seeing what works both from their performance perspective, but also their engagement, their buy-in. So at the middle school, it's a little bit more easier. You just got to keep their attention. At the high school, now we start to see a world where trying is not cool. So keeping all of this in mind and using my body language, my enthusiasm to show my excitement for certain stuff that truly does excite me, that's going to be number one, is bringing your enthusiasm to this stuff and be excited versus frustrating when guys are looking away or they zone out or they're just not interested for one reason or another. So step one is enthusiasm. From there, just a simple perspective, break it into movement patterns, muscle contractions, and then muscle action. I'll explain all of these. We all know the muscle contractions, concentric, eccentric, isometric. So within that realm, I have different phases that I want to develop guys throughout my season. How I accomplish this is the warm up. So the warm up is the one consistent thing that I have before practice, before games, before the training specific sessions, whether that's weight, sprint, speed, or just sports stuff. So it's the one consistent that every coach, every athlete has. What we normally see is the same dynamic warm up routine, just going through the motions. You get the yappers that just find each other, they talk, and they do a lunge, walk 5 yards, do lunge number two, walk 5 yards, and oh, I'm at 15 yards. So I did my lunges, but I just did two. So that day's over. Now I'm leading this, and I'll speak through the phases here. So the action is reps, not steps, right? I'm dealing with a lot of Texas football players that just again go through the motions within their football warm up, and so it's taking control of that. How I organize this though is keep it exciting and keep it interesting. So each day I introduce two new movements. So the purpose here, they do their full warm-up lap and they meet me at the 50-yard line at the Lacrosse X. And then I pick one, two guys to introduce two different movements to. So this could be some pillar, some rotation, some form of step, squat variation, etc. Whatever it may be, I put those guys on the spot. So now the spotlight's on them, whether you're a freshman or a senior, and they're going to make mistakes. They're going to do their best to coordinate. And I give them a little ribbing, put them in a position to experience failure early, but then coach them up in the right position. So they're seeing that everyone's eyes are on them. Now, this is what it actually feels like versus what I think it feels like when I'm making a movement mistake, even though I'm technically managing 30 dudes. Like they think that somebody's watching them, they're going to be embarrassed, whatever. So now I put them in that actually embarrassing situation, but then lead them through it in a constructive manner. So it's movement pattern based squat, step, lunge variation, different pillars, side pillars. So frontal plane, sagittal plane, of course, and then our transverse plane. So just pillars, squat, step, and lunge, introduce two variations of the movement. From there, they break off 15 yards apart at the 45 and the 30-yard line, and then they're in motion. If it's a pillar work, we're right at our station. And then I tell them what movement could be inchworms, could be high knee lunge, lunge with a step up. And then we just rotate through there and we're staying even on our reps. So we go back to our sticks and our equipment. Football, you can just do this. You don't have to stay even. I put my sticks down, so I have to have an even number of exercises. So then this is where I introduce skips as well, speed work. So it gradually ramps up into more dynamic stuff. And then I have straight ahead speed days that are focused, and then a change of direction, a COD day focused. And it's just taking those movements and really chunking them down and developing it. So then each day those get faster, they get more difficult, and it pieces together. So I just have 3 phases throughout the season. Lacrosse runs from January up until till May here. So now I have 3 phases over those different times. And by the end of it, as a coach, I do hand off responsibility to the captains and fade to the back. By then, they have the full movement playbook, and I hand it off. So that's just the warm up 10 minutes. Now I have 4 minutes of either conditioning, speed conditioning, or a strength segment. So this is where the muscle actions come into play. So we've already established muscle contractions, now different muscle actions. So focusing on force reduction, force production, isometric force, our protective force, and then our true eccentrics, which you got to experience at the next level conference in Knoxville. So true eccentric, this is our manual resistance, where Dan and I were partners. Couple of my favorite ones. If I'm laying down on my side, thinking sexy pose, Dan takes a knee behind my hip. And then from here, I have both straight legs. Knees are stacked, heels are stacked. And then I just raise one leg up into, think, athletic position, but I'm laying on my side. Toes are pointing forward. I try to hold that up leg position. For this instance, I'm laying on my left, raise my right leg up. I'm trying to hold that universal athletic position with that right leg. And then Dan provides 90% resistance on the top of my knee, 10% resistance on my foot to make sure I don't externally rotate, right? We want to keep it in our piriformis there. So now I'm resisting and he's taking that away. So we do 4 right, 4 left. And after any true eccentric, we need something dynamic. So explosive lunge jumps, explosive squat jumps with a rotation, whatever it may be. It's just going back to those foundational movement patterns of squat, step, and lunge with some explosivity. So 4 minutes, that's Dan getting a set. He's capped in there, resisting me. I'm the athlete. And then we just switch roles. And I'm trying to keep the intensity and the intent up. And then I hand him off the coach and we start our skill work. So that 4 minute block could also be tempo runs. If we're coming off of a game and we are sore, we want to stride it out. So it's a set percentage. Or if we need intensity, we don't have a game that week, then put in some reactive change of direction drill where I have a rabbit or you're chasing somebody or somebody starts in push-up position, somebody sprints behind them, all the fun stuff we know. So aiming to give the team what they need, but keeping in mind my long-term season development to help us ramp up and be 100% there for playoffs. One thing we did also cover at the clinic was true eccentrics manual resistance for our shins. So this attacks shin splints, and my guys don't have shin splints. That was a problem until trying to figure it out and solve it and using all of these tools within the muscle action to put our guys in a position literally to prevent shin splints. And I got these old school football benches right on the sideline. So usually just bring them out to the 50-yard line, get some freshmen to carry them up. It's not hazing. It's just their rite of passage to carry stuff onto the field. Or if a senior shows up late, he's doing all that, I'll call it grunt work, aiming to shape some behaviors as well. So that's it, man. 14 minutes to start every single practice or training session that are very targeted. There's no stick involved, but certainly puts us in a better position to become better athletes, lacrosse players, football, basketball, whatever it may be.
And I know someone listening is going to be like, well, wait a second. There's no weights involved. You've only got 14 minutes, but it's one of those things we almost have to reframe our mindset around exercise. It's not as simple as just weight on the bar, but as you mentioned, it gets into what are the movement patterns we want to train, what are the contraction types we need to train, and what are the actions of the muscular groups that we need to train. Training doesn't just have to occur in a weight room. It doesn't have to just occur in a power rack. If you're
Yeah.
traveling with the team, you might not have access to half those things anyways. You're still going to get some kind of training stimulus. It just might look a little different. And I think that one of the things that I've been really trying to expand in my own kind of arsenal that way is how do I make it work when I don't have anything? Because again, stuff breaks, tech goes down and, we can't necessarily rely on it, but we can always rely on our hands. We can always rely on body weight. We can always rely on isometrics. There's a lot of things that we always have access to. And I find the more I lean into those and get creative with those, the better effect I can have. And in reality, a lot of these things are largely simple, right? It goes
Hmm.
back to basic anatomy. What does the muscle do? What contraction type does it need? How can I train that? Cool. Check the box, move on. It's not overcomplicated yet. For some reason, we've kind of abandoned this like fundamental foundational line of thinking that way. And I think the other piece that I love about your approach in particular, Tex, is it's a little bit every day. I don't know if I'd
Yeah.
call it like a true microdosed model, but it's a little stimulus every single day with progression and intention. And
Yeah.
ultimately, that's what we need. We don't need to smoke the guys twice a week with like, 10,000 set arm form session finisher and all these different things. Ultimately, a lot of the athletes that I work with, anyways, they really just care about their sport and looking and feeling decent. If you can
Mhm.
check those two boxes for them, they're good to go. They don't necessarily need like squatting 600 pounds. They don't necessarily want to deadlift 800 pounds. Like they're in it for sport, not strongman and powerlifting. So understanding what is your goal, as you mentioned, beginning with the end in mind and then kind of reverse engineering the plan from there, if you will. And I think the way you've kind of thought about putting that together is just really well put out, really methodical that way. I'm curious though, you brought up the true eccentrics
Yeah.
and you brought up the pairing with them that way. Why do you feel like it's so important to pair dynamic and true eccentric type exercises that way? And within your own kind of system or framework for thinking about contraction types, whether that be force production, force reduction, isometrics, true eccentrics, are there any other pairings that you like to put together within them that way?
With the true eccentric starting there, so what we're doing is effectively taking for older athletes. I'll start with us. So for older athletes like Dan and I, we are taking our neurological pathways away. We have these abilities, these I won't call them compensation patterns. We have these neural pathways where stuff just becomes easy for us. So within true eccentrics, and whether you this is weird, but whether you believe in the size principle or not, what we're effectively doing is taking away the ready motor units that we have, so that way our way of explosivity, whatever it may be, for explosive lunge jumps or shooting a basketball or shooting lacrosse, whatever. So we're taking that away with the true eccentrics. I'm targeting hamstrings. I'm targeting AB ductors, AD ductors, all the different leg muscles out on the field, taking away your motor units, your neurological pathway to do so. And then we're asking you to do something dynamic and athletically creative to then create a compensation pattern for you to fall to in the third and fourth quarter when you are taxed. Your body now has more of an opportunity, more of a motor unit window to tap into. So this also I've seen from practical experience over years now, applying this, that the muscle strains, tears, all that goes down because we're creating different pathways. We're targeting AB ductors and AD ductors and increasing their capacity for them to take on different force. If something at the moment doesn't fire that's a major mover, it's not taking in, or a minor mover, it's not taking in all the force that's leading to a strain, a pull, or a tear. So injury risk reduction 101 is through that, working to the true eccentrics. I'll work backwards here. So now it's taking its size principle in my mind, how I would explain it, taking away motor units, your ability to access these, and then really diving deep into the envelope with a safe foundational movement. So that way, when we do the athletic expression of sport at our maximal velocity, maximal effort, then I have the resources to tap into when necessary. So that's why I do the dynamic movement, is to create those versus just do the true eccentric and only take away the motor units. Now rely on the whole body to find a compensation pattern to fall to. So that'd be the true eccentrics. How I would argue for protective force, this is now how I'm changing the setup. And This is my favorite thing to do. I do this on the program that I write for myself that I also put out there. It's called Old Bull, right? Training with Wisdom. So this is where I'm manipulating different foot setup positions. Instead of a neutral squat position, now I go into a staggered squat with my heels, or excuse me, with my toes in line with my arch, my mid step. So I'm squatting down neutral, but the force is different. So now I'm squatting into my back Achilles and then relying on my front hamstring to stabilize my hips and not allowing my body to rotate. Yes, it shortens my range of motion, but at the same time, I played collegiate athlete and a bunch of post career without warming up. My ankles are trash. Kelly Starrett, who's become a good friend over the years, he calls it piss poor tissue. I got piss poor left Achilles from breaking my leg and all sorts of stuff. So I love the staggered squat to target my Achilles there. So then I can take it one step backwards, literally. So now my toes are in line with my heels, and I go active back foot, call these rocket squats. So still no rotation, no favoring left or right, but I'm staying active in that back foot throughout. So now I'm creating and building this tension throughout. So we're escalating in tapping into the isometric force. So we're holding that good active foot position throughout the squat. There's no relaxing in there with the bent knee. So just manipulating, those are two examples. I got plenty. Manipulating our foot position or our hand position. In pull-ups, it could be a staggered grip, or easy one for people to go try is one neutral grip, one pull-up grip, right? One chin up, one pull-up. That changes everything, right? I have to stay active within my bicep. I can't get my full range of motion, and I got to redirect. So these are examples of protective force. It's changing from the neutral. Those need to be earned. For us in the weight room, we need it. It's going to help weight, joint, all that good longevity long term. For my athletes, once we establish neutral, again, working down, and I've worked through phase one, then I start to introduce the protective force setups, the staggered, the rocket, the single leg, think split squat with an active foot, and sending the knee way out over the toes. I know that was just invented recently, Burn, but it's still out there within sprint technique. I don't want to be a bad guy. So continuing down, we talk about isometric force. It's certainly a lot of pillar work, but I also work this into within partners. So now just partners, and this is connected to force producers. So either isometric force where Dan and I are just meeting in the middle and we're holding. Think similar to sumo wrestling. We're just balancing, and I'm working on my anticipatory tuners as an athlete where I'm matching and reading force. Carry this over to sport. This is why I love lacrosse, is defense and offense. Dan's going to run, I play defense. Dan's going to run full speed into me, and I need to understand. My body needs to recall how much force is needed to stop Dan and match him. I can't knock him down because that's going to be a penalty. I don't want to give too little because then Dan gets the advantage and he's going to turn me into a highlight reel. So how do I read and match force? This is where we can introduce this into no stick drills where we're just starting together in contact and then say go and pressing to see who it is. Another example of that would be tug of war, simple tug of war, or there used to be this plastic thing you filled with water that people would grab and be a tug of war. Well, unfortunately, coaches would leave those out in the sun and the plastic would melt, and then they bring it out 6 months later with the same water in there. It'd be all moldy and rotty. And then the first drill, kids, football guys would just rip it right in half. Hilarious. Every time like clockwork. So great idea, but we need to find a product to put it in place. So now finally breaking down, that'd be switching from isometric force into force producers once we start to move. I could have them say, hey, we're staying in place, but I need to find the tug of war with our feet not moving. Figure it out. Now we're force pulling and going. And then my favorite is force reduction, teaching the guys to slow down. Within this is the first drill I introduced day one with the guys. It's called motivation drill. And I did this as an athlete, not knowing anything about strength and conditioning. And I thought it was the stupidest drill of all time because coach had us stand 10 yards apart and then lines, groups of 8, right, 4 and 4. And we just sprint 10 yards and high five our teammate, and they would go, and it's just a little relay race going however long it is. So if I'm not running, I'm cheering my teammate's name. Ah, let's go Dan, let's go Matt, whatever. So now I thought it was stupid, but what thinking about the depths and the layers there, I could say, all right, well, this is Derek Hansen's 10 and 10 rule. I'm sprinting 10 yards and I'm going to decelerate 10 yards, get back in line, and I start to cheer on my teammates. So I can take in strength and conditioning practical force reduction there and force production, right? I get off the ball, I'm sprinting 10 yards, slowing down 10 yards. But this is where we put the social emotional layer on top of it. What happens when I get tired as a teammate? Do I just disappear? Do I just think about myself? Do I rest with my hands on my knees and stop talking to my teammates? Do I then stand tall or notice the energy start to dip in the drill? Remember, 30, 40 people are doing this drill. And do I start to turn around and elevate it? Guys, let's go. Hey, get up, get up. Now I'm talking to the whole group, not just my line. So adding layers of leadership into these and all of these certainly is the opportunity I want to present to coaches on top of all this stuff. But eventually, just like we redirected force reduction, force production, and working all the way to the true eccentric. And that's that mindset over those 1, 2, 3 phases that literally last 5 months. It's not the same dynamic warm up every single day because then routine, we get the law of accommodation. It's going to stop getting their chili hot, and then they're going to stop being interested, and then they're going to blame you that they went down 0-3 or gave up a touchdown on the first drive. And it's like, dude, we warmed up an hour ago. I don't know where your head is. So just aiming to eliminate all those excuses that we know are inevitable for our teenage and our college population and putting them in a position to take ownership of their own bodies and their team's performance.
Quick break because if you're a rehab professional sick of burnout, this could be your answer. Engage Movement's blended practice model is a proven system built by Dr. Ray Gorman, a PT who walked away from the 55-hour-a-week grind and built a blended practice model that doubled his income while working less than 25 hours a week, and he didn't have to rely on the traditional way of selling sessions to do so. It's all about blending remote and in-person services, stacking monthly recurring revenue, and building a business that finally supports your life, not the other way around. This model isn't just theory. Real providers, including myself, are creating lives of freedom and flexibility without being tied to their schedule. And as a listener, you get free access to the complete training. DM my name, Dan, to @RayGormanDPT on Instagram and receive your free breakdown on the model. Yeah, I love that. And I love your focus on versatility as well and constantly changing up the mainframe, adding new stimuli in, adding new different variations in. And just as you started earlier, you mentioned that you add 2 new things in your warm up every single time. It keeps it interesting, it keeps it entertaining, but it's also the conversation around the body just not being static. And, people are constantly evolving. So as a result, our training stimulus has to constantly evolve as well, right? These athletes in sport, I talk about it all the time, how well they compensate. They're constantly coming up with new ways to move, new ways to solve movement problems and movement strategies. And if we're not giving them more of a movement toolbox, if you will, putting more tools in it or giving them new ways to use the tools that they already have, then ultimately we're failing to prepare them for what is the main event, the main thing, right? Game day, tournament time, end of the season, whatever it is that we're working towards, we've got to, again, begin with that end in mind, understand what actions do we need to take to get them there and how can we best prep them for it. And I think that, again, your framework is really well thought out, but I really appreciate that. Focus on versatility, focus on moving the needle forward, and also the focus, again, on that social emotional element that you brought up. It makes me think of a lot of the different warm-up games that I pop up all the time on Instagram. I actually really like them, how it's more gamified than instead of just like, traditional go to the gym, quad pull, knee to chest, 3 sets of 10 this, 3 sets of 12 that. That kind of stuff is not for everything, not for everyone. Sometimes people get bored with it. They find it too basic. They don't find it engaging. And again, it's one of those things that I always ask, what could we be doing better? How could I take my own framework? How could I take the mold that I built and break it, smash it into pieces, and build it into something that's better and stronger? And one of the things that I feel like was missing from a lot of the traditional strength and conditioning programs, at least that I was a part of, was this emphasis on different contraction types and different muscular
Hmm.
groups as well, right? We would do, your squat and your deadlift for the lower body. And that was kind of our lower body work. We thought we checked all the boxes. And it's like, well, wait a second. You mentioned shin splints before. Well, a lot of the kids at our school struggle with shin splints. You mentioned
Hmm.
the hip before. A lot of kids struggle with hip issues. And it's one of those things that I've also seen injury patterns fluctuate now that I'm on the physical therapy side, where, there seems to be a season for knees and a season
Yeah.
for hips. And it's one of those things that I think if we kept a certain element of the training consistent, but ever evolving in the sense that it's getting progressively more difficult with new stimuli added under that main umbrella, whether that be force production or true eccentric force or whatever it is that way, we could reduce and prevent a lot of those things. And ultimately, I think, this conversation around S&C and the role that they can have in sports performance professionals, again, it's not as simple as just making someone the best at the squat or the fastest they've ever been. A lot of these kids are so gifted and talented anymore, they'll get there naturally on their own as long as they don't get hurt. But when they
Hmm.
get hurt, when they experience an ACL injury or they experience, stress fractures or bony fractures or something like that, that moves them so far back along that performance continuum, whether it be in the weight room or in sport. So again, if we can just work every single day, we're going to add some actionable, intentional things that don't require a whole lot of time, that don't require a lot of effort to set up. It's simple things that we can do repeatedly and layer them over time. That solves that issue very, very well, in my opinion. And I think the other piece I want to bring up about this is you don't necessarily have to do everything from your programming standpoint with the athletes at practice when they're right in front of you. Just like I give people stuff to do on the physical therapy side, the same could be done from a strength and conditioning standpoint as well, right? Like, hey, guys, you love those side pillars that we've been doing. We've done them for months. I
Love.
want you to do those every single day at home. I want you to do this much, yada, yada, yada. And we're going to have an accountability check built in, whether that's just like your random pop quiz or like something along those lines every now and then. It's just that ability to think outside the box and get creative and solve problems. And even just taking that a step further for a second, you could use a lot of those things as what I would call, blue collar sports science, if you will. So if you don't have the force plates, if you don't have the dynamometer, if you don't have the VBT, whatever it is that way, but you want some kind of assessment on your athletes, you can do rep match, right? You can go left
Hmm.
versus right side pillar. You can do so many different things that way and kind of create your own battery of assessments to get a look at how your athletes are functioning and then compare that later on the line just as a way to have that, again, sports science framework or assessment framework, if you will, but not necessarily need anything fancy or expensive to do so.
And I got the test. So this was cool, and I explained this at our next level conference. We had a couple in there that I was able to reference to. So I mentioned what a coach will feel if I'm doing eccentric and Dan and I are the athletes. We are gonna on rep one, we are going to fire. It's going to be a fight, and then by rep three or four, it's going to fizzle out, and we're gonna be like, dude, I'm giving my best. With the younger population, with our high school level athletes or any college athlete that, I mean, has not established their base level of strength. They've just been working out. They haven't been training for X amount of years. Now, within the four rep scheme, rep one, you're going to be like, dude, I need you to try. It's going to be like they're just doing nothing. And you, as a coach, will just be like, I'm literally applying two fingers of pressure here. That's it. And then rep three, by that time, you start to feel them switch on and start to recruit. And rep four, you're like, finally. So they have an unadapted central nervous system. It's going to take them four reps. So now within that, this becomes my test. So I take the behavior challenges within the team, and I'm their hands-on partner. I'm their captain for those drills to make sure that they are feeling and aiming to get buy-in, because there's a fine line between being a good teammate and being an asshole. If I'm an asshole by not truly pushing my athletes, then I'm not being a good teammate. if trying is not cool and I'm being that guy, well, I'm taking away from the performance of my teammates when we're partnered up. So now helping them understand like what it feels like to really like, oh my God, that is firing. So over time, their whole athletic career, they're going to switch from that rep one is on to rep four, you're just laughing and you're doing your best. And it is this phase developing a central nervous system, which we would measure using force plates, which we would measure with all these tools. Well, I don't need to measure it now. I just put them into that side pillar. Now instead of straight leg, we go bent knee. This would be for the glute more or MR hip for athletic position. Just imagine athletic position laying on the ground, bent knee, heels in line with my hips, my shoulders and my head. And then I clamshell open, heels are staying connected, clamshell open up the knees. I got to hold those knees, and then coach presses it down. If I know if I've worked with that athlete enough and they're usually on one and they're not on one, then okay, well maybe we're digging a little too deep. As a lacrosse coach, I also am competing, in a healthy sense with these guys in their football training and their football spring practice. They can't not play spring football because that will be held against them. They will be looked frowned down upon, and the whole Texas high school football political game will get thrown in their face that they're not going to get playing time because they play lacrosse or basketball or baseball, whatever. And that's unfortunate. So they have to do both. So these guys are training at 6 a.m. weight training. They're going to school. Then they're doing 7-on-7 after school. And then they're coming to 5:30 p.m. practice. I take that in consideration. Some coaches choose not to because, oh, I'm going to make them pay because they're not committed. It's like, no, they're overcommitted. And I talked about different tools of discipline, one of which is balance, right? Sport life balance, and me understanding and having compassion for them to, as a Texas high school football player, understanding the political side of that game and being like, dude, well, I'll monitor your sprinting. I'll monitor your reps today because you communicated well all of the hard work that you did. I'm going to need a copy of that strength training program, and I'm going to teach you how to manipulate, right? Push when you're going to push and hold back when I need you to hold back because we got a big game against a rival. So I can help manage their poorly designed high school football program that's percentage based. And I also know that these guys don't have adapted central nervous system. So a whole program based off of one rep max from whenever they finished in January football playoffs or lifted for the first time in January. And now we got a whole 4-month program based off a percentage that's a lie. Okay, I can teach you how to manipulate this stuff and put them in a position to succeed. But it's still in line with the idea of muscle contraction and muscle action, and then the self-awareness. And I mean, all the warm-up is doing is teaching them self-awareness. Hey, dead bugs make me feel good, or they stretch my calves. The whatever world's greatest, man, that really helps open up my hips. Okay, so when you communicate to me, hey, my hips are sore, or you feel my hips are sore, you know what to do. So yes, we're developing the athleticism. We're also creating self-awareness and truly ownership of their performance through this opportunity in the warm-up. So there's a lot of buy-in challenges that we can discuss. It's certainly taken me years and a lot of confrontation and conflict to find the best way to apply this stuff and really introduce it. And I'll call it install, to use some sport speak, right? I got to install an offense. If we're changing the way you do things, you need to install this piece by piece. So that's something we can also cover. But just want to in line with you don't need the I'm even forgetting the names, the jump pads. What do we
The force plates.
force plate? We don't need force plates. Like if I'm coaching for years and working with those same people and I get my hands on and feel their ability to resist, like then I'm in line. And this is what I call intent city, right? 2 words. So if we're moving with intent, what I have on the card, we're going to hit the progressions that I foresaw for them writing this program. But if they're going through the motions, maybe their body is fresh, but their mind is off on some relationship or test, uh, or or something, then we're going to miss the mark on the training day, which is going to decrease our trainability long term, especially in this development window. So it's all connected, and I just strongly feel like tapping into the EQ side of things will unlock all the IQ and stuff that we as young coaches value the most, the perfect program, the awesome tools that we have. Yes, you are right, but then how do you get that athlete invested to pour and unlock the potential that you see in them as a coach?
Right. It's almost like what I would call the strength and conditioning equivalent of selling me this pen, right?
Mm-mm.
If you can get your athletes to buy in and understand what you're doing, why you're doing it, the importance of it, when you literally have no equipment, then it's easy when you have access to all the equipment and shiny new toys in the world,
Right.
right? It's one of those things that I think the other piece on the buy-in side, at least for me, like I mentioned before, it's always how can I make the mainframe that I'm using better? How can I evolve it? How can I adapt it? And so on that way. And that's a never ending process. The way we've always done things just doesn't work. We always have to move forward because, again, there's new info coming out every single day. And unfortunately, if you don't keep up with it, a lot of simple things done well will get you very far. However, there's always a better way, and we should always be willing to try something, experiment with something new, and see where it fits. And one of the things that I appreciate that you brought up was the way that you approach things like stretching or mobility training, right? Like take the dead bug as an example. You have your guys do it with straight leg instead of bent leg, right? They're not
Hmm.
going to sit there and do 2 minutes of hamstring stretching because you've only got 4 minutes with them. We're just going to switch our dead bug to straight leg, which is now still the same position they'd end up with for a hamstring stretch, but it's doing so in a way that checks so many other boxes. Hey, we're going to get some core stability. We're going to get this. We're going to get this, right? It's more bang for the buck. So,
Hmm.
it still accomplishes the same goals. And I think that's ultimately what gets laid out to the coaches, the parents, and so on is, hey, look, here's our goals. We're still checking all of those boxes. We're just doing so in a different way than maybe you thought or different way than you intended. But this way is actually more efficient. It's more effective and it gets the athlete more of what they need, not less. It's a more efficient use of their time because, again, we're all pressed for time with athletes.
Yeah, and then why I love that variation of the dead bug is it's the assessment tool as well as the corrective exercise. And if I got 40 dudes doing the same dead bug hold, well, I've already expressed I got ankle issues. Dan, let's just say he's got weak hips. Just hypothetical. Dan's got weak hips. Matt's got tight hamstrings. Whatever. So we're all working on what we are working on, but in my lead, my card, my warm up, it's the same movement. So now it's allowing all of my teammates to target and create self awareness of, oh, my calves. And it changes every single day based off of, football training and weight training or whatever Gold's Gym bro down they're doing on their own. So all of it changes. It's not just going to be a label of, oh, this person has this. And it's going to be progressing. Dead bugs do progress. There are very challenging variations that by the end of it they lead to. And then on that note, with the different variations, when I go back to two notes on this, when I go back and say, like, you remember how hard these were? Now they're easy. So showing them their progression within certain movements um, is a win. But also the return to play we mentioned. Like if I'm out, I'm shelved for ankles, I still need to train and prepare. So all of the warm-up variations that then eliminate ankle, I still know and have knowledge based, or elbow, or whatever it may be. So they still have a toolkit where they can start to practice and not do nothing, right? I'm this because if they miss 2 weeks, 4 weeks, 6 weeks, their conditioning, their play, their speed, their body is 6 weeks behind the rest of their team. We cannot afford that. Maybe 2 weeks behind, and we're going to play catch up just with extra work. This is why I love the bike, right? No eccentric, no force. and no excuses.
I like that. I like that a lot, Tex. And I realize we could probably keep talking about this all
I
day
know.
long and continuing to peel back the layers that way. Is there anything we missed or anything else in particular you wanted to bring up in relation to how you approach training without equipment?
Just the commentary that buy-in and install. So I would not apply a full force change within your warm up. I would take whatever dynamic warm up they've been doing, and then just like I did, I install two new movements. So let's just say it's 10 of the same exercises. Well, then I introduce two, and then we do the rest of our 10. And then the next day, okay, we're going to do these two new ones and these next two or this next one. And then I just peel back. Now we're only going to do eight, and so on. So gradually introduce this and bring enthusiasm and excitement versus the authoritative leadership where it's do this or else. More of authoritarian leading with the excitement and the joy and the benefits. So it's going to increase performance. It's going to reduce risk of injuries and call out a kid of, hey, dude, you remember last season when you were complaining about shin splints the whole entire time? Well, while we're doing these cocky walks or these dead bugs or this manual resistance shin is going to be so that 6 weeks into season, you don't have to worry about shin splints and you can focus on lacrosse, football, whatever. So start building that buy-in from the get-go. This is going to benefit them. Because guards will be up, it's not going to be easy. The stuff it's now we're taking that 14 minutes is going to be conditioning. It's going to be GPP. It's going to be athletically challenging movement patterns. It's not going to be easy. The fronts will come up. The self-defense mechanisms are going to be there. So preparing and getting in front of them the best you can is going to put you in the best position for establishing that buy-in and creating a new way of doing things. Now I turn it into humor. If we see another team who's doing static stretching and counting to 10, boom, we got them. This game's already over. So turning it into a sense of like an air, a confidence, and they've put in the work and the preparation because it wasn't easy. And by the time we get to games, it's going to still continue to progress, but that's a lot of work. Think about 30 practices. We focused for 10 minutes on our warm up times 30. Play defense. I'm not a math guy, so that's 300 minutes of different training that we invested in to develop ourselves as athletes, to get hard work and be more hard-nosed and prepared for this moment. Or we could have done the same thing over and over again for 300 minutes and not gotten better. Just framing this, they did the work, they earned it, they're invested, and then always come back to their body. How's your body feeling? Is it banged up? How are shins? And then as much buy-in outside. If you can go talk to the athletic trainers and say, like, who's come in this week? What's going on? And stay in tuned, and then hopefully they remember last year about how the guys would just be malingerers in the training room the whole time and then miss a lot. So as building buy-in, it sucks about preventative care. You can't feel it. It's just something did not happen. You don't know if it worked or not, but this is a sense of, okay, how does your body feel? Do you feel strong? Do you feel confident? Let's remember to last year in building that buy-in. So you can take it from a like a logos and information based and saying why this is going to work. That can work for some guys. Some guys are just not interested. They're just ball players. So now reference back to previous years of pain and then aim to highlight future performance and and aim to. I say aim because every athlete's different. Some just they don't care. They would just want to be there with their boys. So all different things, all different kids, but doing the same benefit and eventually handing them the cards to run this whole thing, and you get to sit back and do what you want to, which is coach, fix one or two things, and then have a good time with your team.
I love that. I love that, Tex. You're incredibly well spoken and you've got a really robust framework and method of thinking for things. For people who want to find out more about you that way, whether that be online or on social media or that sort of thing, where can they find you at?
Instagram's the best. It's my last name at McQuilkin, McQuilkin. So put my training up there, and then post the pod clips, and then captains and coaches handle as well on Instagram, captainsandcoaches.com, for yeah, podcast, blogs, information, etc. And aim to roll more and more of this out. So getting some good speaking opportunities and filming those as we got the opportunity to in Knoxville, and really turning that into some educational content. Getting ahead of this. And the theme of the captains and coaches is sports don't teach lessons. Captains and coaches do. So like I'm battling that in Texas and football every single day. Right? Football taught me this. Football taught me that. You're going to play football. It's like, no, football's ball. Football didn't teach you anything. You had a coach that led you to those lessons. So helping parents, kids, and coaches understand the responsibility and the power that they do have through their words.
I love that. I love that text. We'll link to all of that in the description below as well. That way, if you didn't quite catch it, you can just click there and see everything that Tex is up to. Really appreciate your time and the insights today, man. Thanks for being here.
Thank you for the opportunity, man. It was great.